In July 1765, a French ship arrived at the harbor of St. Pierre in Martinique. On its deck stood twin sisters from Versailles, Célestine and Marguerite de Valmont, dressed in black silk mourning dresses, far too heavy for the tropical heat. At only 20, they had just lost their father to a sudden tropical fever and inherited his sugar plantation. Bellevue, asterisk on the dock. The plantation overseer, Monsieur Valmont, waited for them. Sunburned and clumsy in his attempt at politeness, he welcomed them and escorted them by carriage through endless fields of sugar cane, where enslaved men and women worked under the brutal sun, backs bent, machetes flashing in rhythm. The sight silently shocked the sisters, who had grown up in the polished world of Versailles. Asterisk Bellevue appeared on a hill, a grand white house with tall columns and wrought iron balconies, surrounded by slowly neglected gardens beautiful, but touched by wildness. On the steps, the house servants stood in a straight line. Marie Rose, the cook, Justine and Therese, the maids, and Thomas, a tall, mixed-race young man responsible for the property's maintenance. Asterisk for a brief moment. Thomas's dark eyes met Célestine's before he respectfully lowered them. Something in that instant made her heart beat faster. Marguerite noticed him too, her fingers tightening on her fan dot asterisk that evening, as the twins walked through their father's house. Full of his books, tobacco scent, and old memories, one thing was already clear. Bellevue was not just an inheritance. It was a world built on secrets, power, and silent tension, and both sisters had already noticed the same dangerous presence at its center. Thomas, asterisk, in their first weeks at Bellevue. The twins tried to understand the world they had inherited. Each morning, Monsieur Valmont brought the plantation accounts, harvest numbers, shipping dates, expenses, and the list of 120 enslaved people who made Bellevue profitable. The twins listened quietly, signing what needed to be signed, but the brutality behind the numbers unsettled them in ways they tried not to show. Asterisk inside the house. Life moved more slowly. Célestine often escaped to the library, the room that still felt closest to Paris. One hot night, unable to sleep, she went there and unexpectedly found Thomas, reading by candlelight. He froze, apologizing instantly, but she stopped him gently. Asterisk. What are you reading? She asked. Voltaire, mademoiselle, he said softly. It was the first private moment between them. A harmless conversation, but something shifted. Asterisk after that night. Célestine began noticing Thomas everywhere. In the gardens, on the balcony, in the corridors. Sometimes it felt like coincidence. Sometimes it did not. Marguerite noticed too, soon. She began calling for Thomas, more often small tasks, excuses, reasons to keep him close. The servants sensed the change first. Whispers moved through the house, soft and careful. Asterisk, then one afternoon, during a tea gathering, a visiting Creole woman eyed Thomas boldly and said, Asterisk, what a fine young man you have here. Her tone carried a sharper meaning. The sisters exchanged a worried glance. Asterisk that evening. They summoned Thomas to the study and warned him to be more discreet. Asterisk, he obeyed. But the look in his eyes said he understood something dangerous. Asterisk, the boundary between the twins and himself had already begun to blur, and none of them could pretend otherwise. Asterisk days at Bellevue continued under the same heat, but the air inside the great house had changed. Asterisk, what began as glances and brief conversation slowly turned into a quiet, unspoken pattern. Asterisk Célestine found herself drawn to Thomas's calm intelligence, his careful words, the way he respected silence, the unexpected depth in his eyes. She asked him about books, about the garden, about his childhood on the island. Each answer pulled her a little closer. Asterisk Marguerite, however, watched him differently. She noticed his strength, the confidence in his movements, the way he carried himself even while obeying orders. Her reasons for calling him were practical at first, but the way her gaze lingered was not. Neither sister spoke of it, but both felt it. Asterisk soon. Valmont was instructed quietly, and without discussion, to assign Thomas exclusively to the personal service of the twins. He moved into a small room near their chambers, officially to be available at all hours. The servants exchanged silent looks, but no one dared question it. Asterisk at night. The silence of Bellevue grew heavier. Asterisk Célestine was the first who could no longer ignore her longing. One humid night, unable to sleep, she stood at Thomas's door with her heart pounding like a drum. When he opened it, he understood immediately. Nothing needed to be said. Asterisk the next night. Marguerite came. She didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. Asterisk Thomas understood. Then that he belonged not to one sister, but to both. Asterisk. The days remained proper and polite. The twins behaved like perfect mistresses in public. They ordered, he obeyed. But the nights blurred every boundary. To survive, Thomas learned to become whatever each sister needed: gentle for Célestine, controlled for Marguerite, because refusal was not an option in a world where he had no rights. Asterisk, and yet, beneath obedience, something dangerous was forming, a connection, a tension. Asterisk, a secret strong enough to destroy. Bellevue, if ever exposed. Asterisk in the servants' quarters. Quiet whispers began, footsteps at night. Soft voices behind doors, the shift in Thomas's schedule. No one dared speak openly, but everyone felt the storm building. Asterisk inside the house. The twins walked past each other with forced politeness, each pretending not to notice how often the other disappeared into the corridor at night. Asterisk in his small room. Thomas lay awake more often than he slept, knowing the arrangement could not last forever, and that one day someone would pay the price. Asterisk. The secret routine inside Bellevue did not stay invisible for long. Houses built on silence hear everything. Footsteps after midnight, doors closing softly, voices lowered too quickly. And the servants, trained by survival, notice even what was never spoken. Asterisk Marie-Rose saw that Thomas no longer ate with the others. Asterisk Justine noticed the rumpled sheets in his small room each morning. Asterisk Therese noticed the way the twins avoided each other's eyes at breakfast. Asterisk rumors did not form into words, but they grew like vines around the walls of the house. Asterisk one afternoon, the facade finally cracked. Asterisk the twins had invited a few neighboring planters' families for tea. The salon smelled of flowers and sweetened coffee. The doors opened to let in what little breeze the island offered. Thomas moved quietly between the guests, offering pastries, refilling cups, always silent, always controlled. Asterisk then Madame Decree, an older Creole woman known for her sharp tongue, let her eyes linger boldly on him. Asterisk, what a remarkable young man you have, she said, her fan lifting slowly. Asterisk, your father always did prefer exceptional servants. She didn't need to explain the meaning. Everyone in the room understood it. The sisters froze. The moment hung in the air like the sting of a slap. Asterisk after the guests left. The house felt too still. The twins' footsteps echoed down the corridor as they summoned Thomas to their father's old study. Asterisk he entered and stood before them, hands behind his back, face unreadable. Asterisk, people are beginning to talk, Marguerite said sharply. Asterisk, you must be more careful, added Célestine, her voice softer but trembling. Thomas bowed his head. Yes, Mademoiselle. Asterisk, but in that brief second before his eyes lowered, something flickered within them, something neither sister wanted to acknowledge. Awareness, maybe even resentment, a warning that secrets have limits. From that day on, the atmosphere changed. Asterisk Célestine watched Marguerite more closely, jealousy tightening inside her chest like a knot. Asterisk Marguerite noticed the softness in Célestine's voice whenever she spoke to Thomas, and it made her blood heat with anger she didn't understand. Asterisk nights became heavier, days became colder. The twins, who had spent their entire lives sharing everything, dreams, clothes, tutors, fears, could now barely share a room without tension burning beneath every word. Asterisk and Thomas Caught between them, walked like a man crossing a collapsing bridge. Each step needed caution. Each expression was measured, because he knew something both sisters refused to admit. Asterisk. They were no longer in control of the situation. The situation was in control of them. Outside. The cane fields rustled under the wind. Asterisk inside. Bellevue waited quietly, holding its breath, knowing something was coming. Asterisk. Something that would break the fragile balance completely. Asterisk. Asterisk. September arrived with heavy rains that soaked the fields and turned the plantation roads into rivers of mud. The heat did not fade. It only became wetter, heavier, pressing on the lungs. Work in the cane fields continued, slower but relentless. Machetes rising and falling under the gray sky. Asterisk inside the great house. A different storm was forming. It began quietly with Célestine's nausea. At first she blamed the heat. Then the meals. Then the island itself. But when the sickness returned every morning, sharper and more persistent, fear began to grow inside her like a shadow. Asterisk, she counted the days and counted again and again. Asterisk. The truth was written in her body before it ever reached her mind. Asterisk, one early morning. As she knelt beside her bed, gripping a basin, Marguerite entered without knocking. The sisters locked eyes, and in that single moment, Célestine knew her secret was no longer hers. Asterisk. How long? Marguerite asked quietly. Asterisk. 6 weeks, Célestine whispered. And you? Marguerite's face went pale. 5. Asterisk. Silence fell thick, suffocating. Impossible to escape. 2 sisters. 2 pregnancies. 1 possible father. The implications wrapped around them like chains. Asterisk. What are we going to do? Célestine whispered, tears threatening her voice. Asterisk. No one must know, Marguerite said fiercely. Not Valmont, not the servants, no one. We will find a solution. Asterisk. But the days passed, and no solution appeared. They could not call a doctor. They could not leave the island. Asterisk. They could not explain 2 unmarried sisters becoming pregnant at the same time. Asterisk. Meanwhile, Thomas knew nothing. Asterisk. Célestine wanted to tell him, needed to. But fear held her back. Asterisk. One night, as she slipped quietly from her room to go to him, Marguerite blocked her path. Asterisk. We must stop, she whispered harshly. Now, completely. Asterisk. And what do we tell him? Célestine's voice trembled. Asterisk. Nothing. We send him back to the fields. He cannot stay near us? Not anymore. Asterisk. Célestine felt her heart break, not just for herself, but for the quiet hope she had allowed herself to imagine. Asterisk. The next morning, they called Thomas into the study. The distance between them felt colder than any punishment. Asterisk. Thomas, Marguerite said firmly, you are being reassigned. You will return to field work under Valmont's supervision. He stood perfectly still. His face remained blank. Only his hands tightened slightly at his sides. As you wish. Mademoiselle, he said quietly. Célestine could not meet his eyes. That afternoon, Thomas was back in the fields, swinging a machete under the relentless sun. Some slaves watched him with suspicion, some with pity, some with satisfaction. His privileged position in the house had vanished overnight. Asterisk. Inside the great house. The twins paced like ghosts, isolated, terrified, hiding their swelling bodies under loose dresses. Avoiding visitors entirely. The tension between them worsened. Marguerite accused Célestine of weakness. Célestine accused Marguerite of cruelty. Both were right. Both were wrong. Then, one evening, a knock sounded on the salon door. Asterisk. Marie Rose entered. Her face unusually serious. Asterisk. Mademoiselle, she said softly. I have served this house for 20 years. I am not blind, and I believe you need help. The twins froze, panic rising in their throats. What do you know? Marguerite demanded. Maria Rose lowered her voice. I know that 2 young women cannot hide pregnancy forever. I know there's a man involved. And I know this island destroys women who let scandals escape their walls. Célestine's hands trembled. Marguerite's jaw tightened. Asterisk. I can arrange things, Marie Rose continued. Discreetly, when the time comes. There are families who take children without asking questions. There are convents that keep secrets. There are midwives who talk to no one. For the first time in weeks, there was a sliver of hope, a dark, desperate hope, but hope nonetheless. Asterisk, as Marie Rose quietly left the room. The sisters looked at each other, not as rivals, not as enemies, but as two women trapped in a fate they never chose. Asterisk, and somewhere in the flooded fields outside. Thomas swung his machete again and again, unaware that the consequences of their secret were about to shape all three of their lives forever. Asterisk. The months that followed felt like an endless prison. Bellevue became a house of whispers and closed doors. The twins rarely left their rooms. Valmont handled the plantation alone, believing the sisters suffered from a tropical illness. Visitors were turned away politely. Curtains were kept drawn. Dresses grew looser, shawls thicker, asterisk, but inside those walls. The silence between the sisters deepened into something sharp. Asterisk for the first time in their lives. Jealousy lived between them, quiet, poisonous. Impossible to ignore. Asterisk Marguerite watched Célestine with narrowed eyes. Asterisk Célestine watched. Marguerite with suspicion. Asterisk, which of them carried his child more deeply? Asterisk, which of them had he preferred? Neither dared speak the question aloud. As their bodies changed, so did their tempers. Small comments became knives. Forced politeness became open bitterness. Asterisk, then in March. The first pain came. Asterisk Célestine clutched the edge of her bed as the contraction stabbed through her like fire. Marie Rose rushed to her side. Justine ran for Memming Josephine, the elderly Creole midwife who was known for two things. Asterisk, delivering children quietly, and keeping secrets even quieter. The labor lasted through the night. The screams were muffled by pillows. The house held its breath. At dawn, Célestine gave birth to a boy, his skin a warm caramel, his eyes a dark, familiar shade. A shade she had seen in Thomas. The resemblance was undeniable. Asterisk Marguerite stood in the doorway. Pale, exhausted, but silent. He is beautiful, she whispered. He looks like him. Asterisk 3 weeks later. Marguerite's turn came. Her labor was shorter, but just as brutal. When it was over, she held a daughter in her trembling arms, a girl with the same dark eyes, the same quiet, intense gaze that Thomas had carried since childhood. Asterisk, the room was heavy with emotion neither. Sister could speak. 2 babies, 2 sisters. Asterisk 1. Father, and a future none of them were allowed to keep. We cannot raise them, Marguerite said finally, staring at her daughter with a heartbreak so deep it made her hands shake. Asterisk Célestine nodded, clutching her own infant tighter, tears streaming down her face. Marie Rose stepped forward gently. The arrangements are made, she whispered. Asterisk, a childless Creole couple took Célestine's son, pretending he was the infant of a dead relative. The girl was taken to a convent in the hills, where the nuns asked no questions and erased scandals as a matter of routine. Asterisk, the separation was devastation. Asterisk Célestine memorized her son's face, the curve of his cheek, the softness of his hair, knowing she might never see him again. Asterisk Marguerite held her daughter stiffly at first, afraid to feel anything. But when the nun finally carried the newborn away, something inside her cracked like glass. Asterisk after the children were gone. Bellevue became colder than ever. Asterisk, the twins walked the halls like ghosts, silent, hollow, carrying guilt no dress could hide. They slept in separate rooms. They ate in silence. Asterisk some days. They didn't speak at all. 3 months passed this way. Then, one morning, a sealed letter arrived from St. Lucie. The handwriting was unmistakable. Thomas, asterisk, hands trembling. The sisters opened it together. Asterisk, greater than Mademoiselle. I heard from travelers that you have had children. I do not know if they are mine, but I choose to believe they are. I hold no anger against you. In this world, we do what we must to survive. Asterisk, I work now on a coffee plantation. My new master is harsh but fair. Asterisk, I think, often our nights of reading. Our quiet conversations. They were the closest I have ever come to feeling free. If the children are mine, I pray they will have a life better than the one given to me. Asterisk. And I hope you find peace as well. Thomas, when the letter ended, Célestine wiped her tears. Marguerite did too. For the first time in months, they looked at each other, not as rivals, but as sisters again. I'm sorry, Marguerite whispered. So am I. As Célestine answered, asterisk. They sat together for a long time, hand in hand, two women forever changed by a secret they would carry to their graves. Asterisk outside. The cane fields, rustled. On Bellevue returned to its quiet rhythm. But nothing would ever be the same inside the great house, where grief, love, betrayal, and duty had woven a story no one would ever know. Asterisk. Time moved differently at Bellevue after the children were taken. Asterisk days blended into each other, slow and heavy, as if the house itself refused to forget what had happened within its walls. Asterisk, Célestine, and Marguerite lived under the same roof, but rarely in the same room. Asterisk. They passed each other like strangers' nods instead of conversations, glances instead of words. Their voices, once full of shared laughter and arguments, had become thin, cautious things. The great house felt too large for them now. Its long corridors echoed. Its gardens grew wilder. Asterisk. Even the air felt heavier, as if carrying the memory of secrets too vast to bury. Asterisk, Monsieur Valmont. Sensing something had broken, but not understanding what, avoided personal questions. He handled the plantation with strict efficiency, keeping the twins' involvement minimal. He preferred it that way. Whatever illness, mood, or grief afflicted the young mistresses made them easier to manage from a distance. Asterisk. The servants adapted quickly. Asterisk. Marie Rose moved quietly through the house, careful with her words. Asterisk. Justine and Thérèse worked silently, avoiding anything that might open old wounds. Asterisk. But people talk, even when they shouldn't, even when whispers can ruin lives. Asterisk. Some plantation workers noticed how Thomas had been sent away suddenly. Asterisk. Some noticed the twins' sudden isolation. Asterisk. Some wondered why two young women avoided visitors for so many months. Asterisk. Rumors grew, but like vines, they grew quietly, clinging to walls, spreading only in the shadows. Asterisk. The twins, meanwhile, carried on with life because they had no choice. Asterisk. They signed documents, approved schedules, attended to the daily rhythm of the plantation. Asterisk. But there were moments rare, brief, when their fricade cracked. Asterisk. Célestine would freeze when she heard a baby cry in the distance. Asterisk. Marguerite would pause, trembling, when she saw a child in the village with dark eyes too familiar. They never spoke of it. They no longer needed to. Asterisk. One evening, months after the letter from Thomas, a storm rolled across the island. The sky turned bruised purple, and the wind tore through the cane fields like a warning. Rain hammered the roof, and thunder shook the windows. Asterisk. Marguerite found Célestine in the salon, staring at the storm alone. Asterisk. For a long moment, neither sister spoke. Then Marguerite said quietly, "Do you ever think about them?" Célestine didn't look away from the window. "Every day." Asterisk. Marguerite swallowed hard. "Do you think they'll have a good life?" Asterisk. No, Célestine whispered, "but I hope they'll have a better one." Asterisk. The storm outside roared, but inside the room, there was a fragile stillness, something like the first breath after drowning. Marguerite sat beside her sister. Slowly, tentatively, their hands found each other. It was the first time they had touched in months. Their grip was weak. "But real, we're all we have left," Marguerite murmured. Célestine nodded. "We always were." The storm raged on, but the distance between them finally began to shrink. A fragile peace, one born of pain. Silence and shared loss settled over Bellevue. Asterisk. And though the twins did not know it yet, life was preparing to test them one last time. Asterisk. Years slipped by Bellevue, soft and heavy like the island fog. Asterisk. The twins grew older first quietly, then visibly. Their youth faded into a delicate, dignified stillness. They were no longer the bright, curious girls who had stepped off a ship from Versailles. They were women shaped by silence, by responsibility, and by a secret that bound them together more tightly than blood. Asterisk. Bellevue continued to prosper. Asterisk. The cane fields expanded. Ships came and went. Accounts remained full. Asterisk from the outside. Célestine and Marguerite became known as the Valmont sisters, too elegant, reserved French ladies who never married, who ran one of the island's wealthiest estates, and who preferred solitude over society. People whispered about their oddness, their quiet lifestyle, their refusal to entertain suitors. No one ever guessed the truth. But the truth never left them. Asterisk some nights. Célestine would walk to the balcony and stare at the dark sea, wondering where her son was, how old he had grown, what name he now answered to, whether he had her smile or Thomas's eyes. Asterisk some nights. Marguerite woke with her hands trembling, remembering the soft weight of her daughter in her arms, remembering the cry that echoed in her mind long after the child had been taken away. Asterisk, they never spoke of the children, but they never forgot them. Not once. Asterisk Thomas remained in St. Lucie for several years. Occasionally, travelers brought vague news, nothing specific. Only whispers that he worked well, kept quiet, caused no trouble. Some said his new master was harsh. Others said Thomas had learned to keep his head down and survive. Asterisk, Ben. One season, news stopped coming at all. Whether he lived or died, the sisters never found out. He simply vanished from their world, leaving only a letter and 2 children behind. Asterisk life moved on. But the twins carried the memory like a scar hidden under fine silk. Asterisk as time passed. The people of Martinique came to view them with a certain respect. The twins were seen as wise, serious, unwavering women who had endured more than they ever shared. And in that sense, the rumor was true. They had endured more than anyone could imagine. Asterisk on quiet evenings. They would sit together on the veranda, watching the cane fields sway under the wind. They didn't talk much anymore. They didn't need to. Their bond had been tested, broken, rebuilt, burned, and reforged into something stronger. Asterisk.